We have talked about reclaiming our power, our hope, and not surrendering to doomscrolling or fearscrolling narratives. Today, we go deeper and press the conversation around fear to bring us freedom. We don't want to live our lives afraid. There's no life in that. Fear is not the place to make our best choices. We know that. To live under constant stress will wreck us. In a time of so much fear, what do we do?
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday? So I call you up and you call me down. Would it be okay?
Well, hello and welcome to the FreedHearts podcast. My name is Robert Cottrell and I'm here as always with
Susan Cottrell.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And again, connect with us at freedhearts.org. Just as a reminder, Susan, you do some life coaching for individuals, couples, about fear, about relationships, all kinds of things. You have a very limited time that you do that. If you're interested out there in that, please email us and there's a little connect button on the website. Go there, connect with us, and we'll see if we can work something out. So, yeah. So we've talked a lot about reclaiming our power, reclaiming our hope, not surrendering to fear scrolling, to doom scrolling, those kind of narratives out there. And so what we want to really press into now is the whole conversation around fear. And I mean, isn't it usually perceived as a negative, a bad thing? But fear can feel scary. And just to talk about it or think about it. But what we want to press into here is fear that brings us freedom. We don't want to live our lives afraid. There's no life in that. Fear is not the place to make our best choices. We know that. But fear is really helpful when we're under threat, a genuine threat. Fight or flight will save our asses in a life-threatening situation, but you can't live from there. It'll wreck you. The constant stress, the cortisol your body shoots through you to deal with that stress will wreck us. We sense danger, but we don't want to live from there. So what do we do? How do we balance this?
Yes, that's a great question. What makes fear so great also makes it deadly. When you're in fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex shuts down, so all your energy is moved into your survival, which is always the highest priority. So, say you're driving on the freeway and somebody swerves in front of you and you got to make some fast decisions. Your blood is pumping now, you're hyper-focused. You see that you don't have time to brake. There's a truck in the lane to the left and a shoulder to the right. There's some signs along the shoulder, but even if you plow into those, it's the safest option. In a split second, you've pulled off to the right, avoiding the car ahead, the truck, and even the signs on the shoulder. Well done. You take some deep breaths to bring your heart rate down. It takes a minute because that was a big surge of adrenaline. But you're grateful for that instinct. No conscious thought involved, just instinct. Instinct just saved your life.
Yeah, absolutely. But, to live in that constant flood of cortisol is deadly.
Yes.
And you've talked to me many times about how you might help me with my health or whatever.
Yeah. My way to protect us together.
And what has always been my answer actually was the answer of a couple of doctors that I saw early on in this. But what has always been my answer?
To reduce the stress. Yeah. Yes. Which usually has a base of fear. So, but the stress is the main thing. So we have to differentiate between what is false, fear that's false, that false evidence appearing real.
Yeah,
Remember that?
And real fear that will save your ass.
That's
but
right.
It's the gift of fear, though, versus the curse of fear.
That's right. And this leads into one of my favorite books to recommend. I recommend it always. It's called The Gift of Fear. And it's by Gavin DeBecker. And it's easily the most helpful book about fear I've ever read.
Yeah, like Gavin DeBecker is kind of the go-to for risk assessment. He's worked with many celebrity clients to track down stalkers. He's worked with anti-bullying programs. He's worked with the government on terror assessment. And here's what I think you love about him is that he understands true risk and helps the reader understand that too. And he helps make sense of our fear.
Yes.
And he helps not, I believe, by telling your fear to just stand down, but to take its rightful place in keeping you whole and alive, which is its purpose.
Exactly. And I encourage you listeners to read this book for yourself, because we can't begin to do it justice in this podcast episode. But it will change your life if you read it, and it will change your relationship to fear and free you from fear to make fear work for you instead of against you. I read it like 20 years ago, and I was afraid to read it because I was already prone to fear, and I was afraid it would make me more afraid. But my friend sent it to me. She knew it was the only way I'd read it, as if she just sent it. And I, in fact, saw now that you can get a free PDF copy. So there you are. It would be free to you as well. But it shifted my relationship with fear, and it made me much less afraid. And that's pretty remarkable. So I'm going to try to give you some helpful information from this book.
Yeah, because right now, and we're doing this episode now because we feel that that fear has just ramped up to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And many in our community, many of those who love and care for and support those in the LGBTQ community are terrified, not just afraid, but terrified.
Yeah.
And sometimes rightfully so. But there's so much fear that we see it in people that are close to us. We see it in people that we interact with. They're just, they feel just overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And so we thought that this would really make a lot of sense to do.
Yeah. So what is fear? Fear is a valid, necessary response in our nervous system to a real threat. It helps us survive. It's a gift. But when it's overused, like anything, if it's not used according to manufacturer's instructions, it won't work the way it's meant to. And how does it get out of whack? And you may think I'm going to tell you that, it's because it's stuck in the on position, because we think a fight with a coworker is the same as a threat from a saber-toothed tiger, and that our evolution hasn't caught up with that. So we're kind of stuck, because people say that all the time, that, but that's not what I'm going to say. It may be true, but I found something different in the gift of fear that's much more immediately helpful and empowering. So here it is. We have an amazingly equipped inner guidance system that recognizes danger, real danger, immediately, and notifies us with a sense, a feeling, like spidey sense. And it not only notifies, it also provides those fight or flight responses to get us moving and propel us to safety. The problem is we've been deeply conditioned, badly conditioned, to ignore those instinctive signals, to reason away those signals. So we no longer distinguish a real threat from something that's just trumped up. And when we ignore the specific threats, the sense of get out now, leave the room now, then we don't trust our ability to identify fear, and everything becomes fear. Do you see that? When we stop listening to our inner guidance, our instinct, and we've been trained not to listen to it, then we no longer discern between real threats and imagined threats. So everything is scary because we don't trust ourselves to distinguish the difference.
And just as you say that, I sit here and think, wow, religion really understands this, and they have capitalized on it, because the teaching and the narratives are that this is a real threat, people.
Yeah.
You better fight or fly. Right. This is a real threat. Mm-hmm. And so they keep their congregations, those in the pew, in this constant state of fear of the them, and then fear of questioning what religion is teaching you, because the ultimate fear, and we're going to talk about this next week, is the fear of hell. And Oh my gosh, they understand this so well, and they just keep us in this constant state of fear, so we can be controlled.
And the other critical part of it is that they tell us we can't trust ourselves.
Well, that's right. They say the heart is wicked. No, the heart is deep. Remember, we talked about this many times. Right. The word does not say, or scripture does not say that. You know, that's right.
So it's two-part. The world is very, very scary, and you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not.
So trust
us. Yeah. That's the whole thing. So let me give you an example here. My friend was at a resort with her husband and her 2 boys. I think they were out by the pool, and there was a man looking at her in a way that really unsettled her. She knew he was not safe. Then she said, "I'm going to go get in the sauna." Note to self, don't announce your movements in front of someone who scares you. Okay, so she went to the sauna, was in there just a few minutes, and she heard in her head so clearly, "Get out now." It was strong and clear. She left immediately, found her family, and they went on and did whatever they did. The next morning, in the breakfast area, that man was there, and he was staring daggers at her, and she just knew that she had barely escaped him. It gives me chills to hear that. And I had that same feeling once. I don't know if I told you this, Rob. I've had it more than once, I'm sure, but this is the one I remember. And we were serving food at a food kitchen, if you remember that, with the kids. It was Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And there was a whole group of homeless men, mostly men, and all was well. It was a very enjoyable, pleasant time. People were all nice and everything, kind. And then I saw a man, and the way he looked at me terrified me. I thought, I do not want to be in arm's reach of him. And I get goosebumps just remembering that. And it's nothing I could put my finger on. I couldn't say. It was just a sixth sense. And it was my still small voice saying, no. It was a room full of people. Nothing was going to happen right there. But I scooted behind you so that I was out of his line of vision. And when we left, I held on to you to make sure we weren't and made sure we weren't followed. And if I tried to quantify this in court, I'd have been the one who'd be suspect. I know you know what I'm talking about here. And likewise, we're equipped to sense and immediately respond to danger like that. We're just equipped for it. Our mind-boggling fight, flight, or freeze capabilities, our thinking brain could never come close to. We all understand when we see a saber-toothed tiger, our body shuts down unnecessary systems and pours those resources into our survival within 5 seconds. Your legs can suddenly run way less than 5 seconds, microseconds. Your legs can suddenly run much faster. You can suddenly lift a car that someone's trapped under. Your eyes dilate so you can see more clearly. You hold your breath so you'll be less detectable by a predator. That's why we hold our breath when we're nervous. We ball up as much as possible, again, to be less detectable. That's why we go into a fetal position in trauma. These are all factory-installed responses to help us survive, which is priority 1. And we are factory installed to recognize and respond to those cues of danger before we even understand where the danger is. And if we had to rely on our conscious brain to find the reason why that flash of raincoat triggered something in you, you'd be dead before you could ever put it together that, oh, that flash told me somebody is there that shouldn't be there. So, lock the doors first and ask questions later. This is your body's workaround to bypass our thinking brain and respond immediately, instinctively to get us out of danger. Then you can go deconstruct the details of what happened later after you're out of danger. Like in the example he used in the book, a woman was waiting in a car and saw a flash in the rearview mirror. She was in the passenger seat waiting. And, that's pretty close in the rearview mirror. And she wasn't quite quick enough to hit that lock button. Note to self, lock it immediately. Not to live in fear, but just to be safe. But anyway, and this guy wearing the raincoat she saw in that mirror got in the driver's side and drove off with her. Now, I'm telling you this from memory, but that's the gist of the story. The problem, as Gavin DeBecker describes it, is that we have been conditioned to mistrust this intuitive response. Haven't you? Haven't you been conditioned to that? Where we say to ourselves, I'm afraid of that man in the elevator that just opened, but I have no reason to be afraid. I don't want to look silly, so I'll go ahead and get in the elevator. And in the story that DeBecker tells, the woman who gets in that elevator, well, she wished she hadn't. She got in the elevator, she said later, because she didn't want to look silly. And as DeBecker says, what's sillier, getting locked into a steel box with someone who scares you or waiting for the next elevator? But we're conditioned to mistrust ourselves. I know I have been, just as that woman was, to ignore my inner voice, my true north compass. I could have easily gotten in the elevator with someone who scared me. Not today, I wouldn't, because I know better now, but I would have then. And, I actually talked about this while I was reading the book, I thought this through. Because we think, I don't want to hurt the feelings of the man in the elevator. Okay, but what about me? What about me? And so as I was thinking through this 20 years ago, I imagined this scenario. And as I looked at the open elevator, suddenly saying, oh my gosh, and turning and walking as if I just remembered something. These are the things I think about. But, again, which would you rather do? Hurt the feelings of a random man who scares you? Or risk far more than hurt feelings for yourself?
And that, I talked about the church using this, but that should be telling. What is the church afraid of? What is the church afraid that still small voice is going to say to us?
Exactly.
Why would they be motivated? Let's just talk through this for a second. Why would the church be motivated to teach me that I can't trust my own heart?
Yes.
That I can't trust the still small voice.
Yes.
That I can't trust the source that Jesus said would lead us in all truth. Well, it must be because what that voice is going to say to me will somehow impact in a negative way what the church is saying to me or trying to teach me.
Yeah, they're not saying it for your benefit, that's for sure.
That's right. This should be a huge red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just a reminder, you can trust. Your heart is good, and you can trust that your intuition, that still small voice.
You may still have to machete out some of the conditioning that's in there, the fear that's been planted in there for you, but your heart is good. So I'm going to read to you from The Gift of Fear. I pulled up that free PDF copy I told you online. And because I wanted to kind of find some passages to read to you. And honestly, I could have just opened up at random and found something profound to read. But this part speaks to our ability to identify risk. And that's his point, is he's saying we must take responsibility for our own safety because our authorities will not do it for us. Good news is we are able to do that for ourselves. We can and do identify risk all the time. We just don't recognize that we do. Remember, if we don't recognize when something's really a risk, then basically we're a sitting duck and we're subject to generalized fears because we have no experience of our ability to count on our inner guidance system, right? So here's what he says.
This is directly from the book here?
Yes.
Okay.
Throughout our lives, each of us will have to make important behavioral predictions on our own without experts. From the wide list of people who present themselves, we'll choose candidates for inclusion in our lives as employers, employees, advisors, business associates, friends, lovers, spouses. Whether it is learned the easy way or the hard way, the truth remains that your safety is yours. It's not the responsibility of the police, the government, industry, the apartment building manager, or the security company. Too often we take the lazy route and invest our confidence without ever evaluating if that is earned. As we send our children off each morning, we assume the school will keep them safe. But we know that might not be so. We trust security guards, the unemployment pool that gave us the son of Sam killer, the assassin of John Lennon, the hillside strangler, and more arsonists and rapists than you have time to read about. Has the security industry earned your confidence? Has government earned it? We have a side note, has the church earned it? We have a Department of Justice, but it would be more appropriate to have a Department of Violence Prevention, because that's what we need and that's what we care about. Justice is swell, but safety is survival. Just as we look to government experts, we also look to technology for solutions to our problems. But we will see that your personal solution to violence will not come from technology. It will come from an even grander resource that was there all the while within you. That resource is intuition. It may be hard to accept its importance because intuition is usually looked upon by us thoughtful Western beings with contempt. It's often described, I'm still reading here, it is often described as emotional, unreasonable, or inexplicable. Husbands chide their wives about, quote, feminine intuition, and don't take it seriously. If intuition is used by a woman to explain some choice she made or concern she can't let go of, men roll their eyes and write it off. We much prefer logic, the grounded, explainable, unemotional thought process that ends in a supportable conclusion. In fact, Americans worship logic even when it's wrong and deny intuition even when it's right. Men, of course, he goes on, have their own version of intuition, not so light and inconsequential, they tell themselves, as that feminine stuff. Theirs is more viscerally named, a gut feeling. But it isn't just a feeling. It's a process more extraordinary and ultimately more logical in the natural order than the most fantastic computer calculation. It is our most complex cognitive process, and at the same time, the simplest. You heard what he wasn't dissing women's. He's saying this about both women and men's, just about intuition in general, of course. Okay. Mm-hmm. He goes on. People do things, we say, quote, out of the blue, all of a sudden, out of nowhere. These phrases support the popular myth that predicting human behavior isn't possible. Yet to successfully navigate through morning traffic, we make amazingly accurate, high-stakes predictions about the behavior of literally thousands of people. We unconsciously read tiny, untaught signals, the slight tilt of a stranger's head, or the momentary sustained glance of a person 100 feet away tells us it's safe to pass in front of his 2-ton monster. We expect all the drivers to act just as we would, but we still alertly detect those few who might not, so that we are also predicting their behavior, unpredictable though we may call it. So here we are traveling along faster than anyone before the 1900s ever traveled, unless they were falling off a cliff, dodging giant, high-momentum steel missiles, judging the intent of their operators with a fantastic accuracy, and then saying we can't predict human behavior.
Wow.
That is just beautiful and so true. We need to revitalize our trust and our own instinct. We have been conditioned to consider everyone's feelings but our own, on purpose, to keep us subjected to those who want to control us. Outliers, LGBTQ people, people of color, women are especially conditioned to mistrust themselves, although men too have been trained into logic instead of their true selves.
And again, have you experienced this kind of minimizing in church or in some other non-affirming situation? I mean, where you know what's being said is untrue, but if you challenge it, you'll be the one who's vilified. I mean, we have.
Yes.
And I know, beloved, you know what we're talking about here.
Yes. And we're going to have to find our way back to our true hearts. This was about reclaiming our power, our true north over our fear. Because just as he said, we can't count on government or police or anyone else to protect us. We must take responsibility ourselves. We also cannot count on religious leaders or family or traditions or habits to tell us who we are and whether we're worthy. We must revitalize our true north to guide our spiritual ship. No one else can do it for us. Don't outsource your personal safety, and don't outsource your own true knowing. This may take some real intention and some awareness to do it. Okay, I'm going to give you one more analogy here. Our feet were designed to run, to respond to the earth, to walk, and to run. They were designed to adapt to the terrain and not get injured. There was an article I read that said, the structure of the foot and lower leg is very efficient at absorbing the shock of landing and turning the energy of the fall into forward motion through the springing action of the foot's natural arch. Scientists have observed that runners who wear shoes typically land heel first, while the barefoot runner lands with a springier step on the middle or the ball of the foot. That's the design. But as cushioned shoes became the norm, runners have lost that ability to absorb and to move, and they suffer increased energies. Fascinating, isn't it?
Wow.
That the more shoes were designed to protect the foot, the more they hurt it. And the more we have lost touch with our spiritual true north, the more we've outsourced it to religious leaders to protect us, the more wounded we have been. So here's your assignment. Reclaim your ability to protect yourself by trusting your true north and not counting on authorities to do it for you. Reclaim your ability to hear your own spirit and don't count on spiritual authorities to do it. Use the shoe analogy to spur you on. Picture those runners who run marathons barefoot. And if you can, read The Gift of Fear. It's free on the internet. He also has other variations on the theme if another title sounds more fitting to you, although I think that one's the foundational book. Mm-hmm. And also you can watch videos of him talking about his work.
Yeah.
But we love you and we want you to be free of your fear. We want you to be safe and whole and at peace. Understanding the power of fear, the gift of fear, will help you not be overwhelmed and stressed and feeling hopeless. It will give you what you need.
Yeah, that's well done. So, fear. Now that we're talking about fear, let's talk about hell. That's what we're going to do next week. You know, we want to get into hell. We've talked.
We don't want to get into hell.
No. I mean, you know what I mean. Our most popular episode
try not to do.
Our most popular episode of all time is the one where we talk about, it's called one of the most deadliest teachings in all of humanity. And we start out by saying, and it's the teaching of contempt, the us versus them. And we say, this is one of the two most deadliest teachings in all of humanity. Well, we never really got into what's number one there. And the deadliest, most dangerous teaching in history is the myth of hell. Yep, it's a myth. And it's the idea of a hell is absolutely vital to the teaching of contempt. The fear used by religion to manipulate us, and people are freaking terrorized. So we are going to get into it. We're going to talk about hell. We're going to address what you've heard. We're going to talk about what you maybe haven't heard, and we are going to deconstruct this whole thing. Why? So your hearts can be freed to love and be loved, because you are loved, you are worthy, you are beloved, you are not alone. We love you. We'll talk to you next week. This is going to be fun. Bye.
Bye.
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday, so I call you up and you call me down? Would it be okay?
You've been listening to the Freed Hearts Podcast. We have extensive resources and vibrant, inclusive community for you at freedhearts.org. Please just come say hello. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for the podcast, just email us at podcast@freedhearts.org. Audio engineering is provided by Luke Johnson. The music is provided by our daughter, Hannah Cottrell, who is Grammy nominated. You can find out more about her and her music at hannahcottrell.com. Please share, subscribe, and follow on your favorite platform, and support us if you can. Thanks for listening.
Would it be okay